The Sober Pod is proudly sponsored by Axioms Health, the first of its kind where treatment from drug and alcohol addiction is brought to you in your home. It's a full customizable treatment plan that includes medical care, individual counseling, family therapy, acupuncture, and peer support recovery, to name a few. For more information, visit us at axiomshealth.com. And on to the show.
Thanks for tuning in. Welcome aboard the Sober Pod with your hosts,
Sam,
Devin,
and Chris. We are a podcast that digs deep into topics surrounding recovery from addiction. We're not affiliated with any one particular brand of recovery or organization. This is your podcast as much as it is ours. Support us by sending us topics, questions, and ideas for the show.
So sit back,
strap in,
and enjoy the ride.
Welcome to
the Sober Pod. The Sober Pod. The Sober Pod. The Sober Pod. Call your sponsor. Call your brother. Call your mother. Show starting in 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, everybody. Good evening. We are here in my basement this evening in this. I was about to say my last name. In the Sam studio down here in Sterling. I got Chris over. We are missing Devin tonight.
Yep.
And we wanted to put this thing on as a bonus feature, as a bonus episode. There's
bonus ep.
Yeah. But something came to mind that we wanted to bring to you guys and want to discuss, because I called Chris with it and sort of my mind was blown. Just wanted to make an episode of some feedback or some thoughts we had, and wonder if you guys would have them too, on an episode of the This American Life podcast that we heard on recovery. I think it came out 1st of February. And it was mainly an episode of two dudes doing what we're doing. They came up with the idea of doing a podcast. And their thing was they didn't necessarily want a podcast about recovery. I think it was, and correct me anytime I'm wrong here, Chris. I think they wanted a podcast about their own recovery, but they literally wanted it to be about war stories.
Right.
During their use.
Yeah, so it was stories about when they were using and drinking and the escapades they got into and that sort of thing.
And it started off with an interesting take on it. One guy, Dave. So sorry. Let me rewind. Let me just rewind for a second. So the podcast is This American Life, and it was called Wartime Radio. And two hosts. His name is Dave, and the other guy's name was Chris. Dave, I think, had 4 months, and Chris had 2.5 years. And you can hear in the episode that in one of their episode called what is the podcast name?
Dopey. And before unless you are okay with us giving away what happens, I would highly recommend pausing this episode and going back and listening to this episode, This American Life. I think the episodes, the number stood out to me. It was like 667. It's like the episode right after 666.
I can't believe they have 660 fucking 7 episodes. That's
I know.
Just
they're just cranking them out. God.
And they're certainly not doing it in the Sam studio in a basement somewhere either. So
yeah, they got a team of people. Such
a good shout out for those guys. They're definitely one of our inspirations.
Oh yeah.
This American Life. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is why we pay Chrissy the big bucks, you guys. Definitely, there's going to be a lot of what is that thing when you ruin a movie?
Spoilers.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of spoilers, but. So pause it, listen to it. I certainly didn't go back and listen to those guys' episodes, although I will.
Yeah.
But a big shout out to those guys at Dopey.
Yep.
Especially Dave. So basically where was I? So what happened was, they just wanted to make it about wartime stories. And this guy, Dave, said to himself, or said to everybody on the podcast, if this starts going in the way of recovery, then I'm out. verbatim. He said, like, if this starts being talk about solutions or like literally what we're doing, and which actually, Chris, it made me sort of self-conscious last night.
Yeah.
Listening to it, because I was like, man, are we boring? Because that's what he said. He said, I'll be out because this stuff is boring. And I'm like, are we fucking boring? Like, you know, because they just, I mean, it's a good niche. It's a good hook. They just wanted war stories while their work, to me, they seem to be working a program of recovery.
Yeah.
But they just wanted their podcast to have that angle, I guess.
Yeah. And I think I really related to Dave, especially at 4 months. I remember when I had 4 months sober, and like I did want to talk about war stories in meetings. And I remember like people in my network were like, why are you sharing that shit? Like either you shut up or you share about the solution. And that was sort of the network that I had. But I remember feeling exactly like Dave at 4 months, where I did want to talk, because some of the stories that we have are ridiculous and they're hilarious and they're sad, but they're true. And, you know, sort of wanting to process that. Like I really related to him in that sense.
And there's a bad rap in it's almost like I mean, here's the rub about this thing too. There's a bad rap for people who share their war stories.
Right.
In meetings or therapy sessions, or, you know, like in groups, in group settings. But here we're mentioning mainly meetings. Somebody will take you on the side after and be like, man, you know, you got to share a little bit of the solution. And then you almost like get away from that. It becomes like a hot stove in a way, you know, like you don't want to touch a war story. But I think there is a time and place for those. And
oh, absolutely.
And in my case, like having, and those for me, like have helped me remember some of the ridiculous things and some of the god-awful, embarrassing moments of my using life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And there are months that go by and I don't think about those.
That's true.
You know?
I have I don't think I've told you this, but I have a group text that I'm actively going back and forth with some guys. And they're all guys that I used to get high with, but are now either in recovery or just not using. So maybe, actually, I guess they're all in recovery right now, thankfully. It's 6 of us on a group text. So I'm going to shout out the group text called Monkey Bars. And most of the chat is about how, well, most of the chat is just ridiculous memes. But every once in a while, we'll all get on a rant on how grimy we all were. And it's almost like a contest. Like, you know, like, you remember when you robbed me and then you left me stranded on Route 1 in Alexandria? Yeah, you're a piece of shit, you know?
I'll see you tonight at 7:30 before the meeting.
We'll see you at the meeting, yeah.
So great.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like, you know, but even though, you know, having some time now, it's still good to like remember, oh yeah, like, dude, I was a scumbag.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%.
The life that I lived.
100%.
Insane.
And you can tell, like, as This American Life is presenting that podcast about Dopey, they did it in such a, you know, it's so well produced, but you can start seeing within those 25 minutes the evolution of that show, where, yes, they wanted to start it off with nothing but war stories, but there were some moments within that podcast's life, which lasted about 2.5 years, at least from the time that podcast started till now. It's been 2.5 years. There were some times where they're quoting the big book, you know, the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they were talking about, there were some real things that started coming up. So I started feeling the evolution of that show. And I think they brought guests on. One of the interesting things about that is they had a friend who would call in who was still using.
Yeah.
And they would treat it as exactly what that was. A friend that was still using that would call in. I mean, I haven't listened to their full episodes, but it seemed like they wanted to hear from him. It seemed like they talked to him a little bit. And then at the end, they'd be like, man, just be safe. Yeah, he had ridiculous stories. He probably just robbed the bank and then called the podcast up or something. You know, it's just fucking silly. And I didn't know where that podcast was going. And slowly but surely, I started thinking, is someone going to relapse in it? Or is someone going to die? Is the podcast going to become solely about recovery? Like, where is that going? And
See, I didn't think that at all.
you didn't think that?
I didn't think that at all because
What was your thought process as you're listening to them?
I just thought they really I just thought This American Life really liked the idea, so they wanted to feature it.
Okay.
And because no one had done it before, and that it was creating sort of this Howard Stern type of atmosphere that you don't really get to hear much about. And Dave, it sounded like Dave is a big fan or was a big fan of Howard Stern. So that's actually was like sort of what they were going for, at least part of it. So I thought, I didn't think it was necessarily going anywhere. I just thought they were like presenting this thing. And then of course, boom, their friend that they bring on, that they brought on certain episodes or occasions, his escapades of getting drunk or trying to get sober, he dies.
Heroin overdose.
Was it a heroin overdose? Okay.
It was a heroin overdose, straight up.
I
He had
think his
called
name
to
was
the show,
Todd,
maybe
right?
to Todd.
Yeah, Todd. Yeah.
R.I.P.
Yeah. And so the episode after that, it was like a very somber Dave and Chris. And they were talking about how their friend who they had on the podcast multiple times had just died. They broke it down on there.
It was so profound in the sense that, it made me think, how do you deal with something like that? I mean, we see people relapse all the time. We're going to have some guests on the show, hopefully, that won't relapse, but there is a big chance that people as guests that have come, once or twice or whatever, however long this goes, that they might go back out and drink. And, it's weird for me because it gave me the thought of sometimes I want to embrace and talk about it and be super honest with it and be vulnerable with somebody relapsing or even talking about my own relapses. Because I think at this point, I will consider myself a chronic relapser with a few years recovery. But the other side of me doesn't want to touch it and doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want to look at it. And those guys were so it's exactly what Chris said. They were inspired by Howard Stern. And Howard was and still is as real as you can get. That form of not only comedy, but just realness to everyday life, the fucking ugliness of it, the being in the trenches of it and whatnot. And Howard was able to keep it real. And so those guys were inspired by him. And it seemed to me like they kept it real and they talked about it. And I want to go back and listen to some of the episodes post their friend's death to see what kind of stuff they brought to the table. How silly were they still? Mm-hmm. Did they still go in that same direction as only wartime? Because I think within the podcast, they said that Dave started to change a little bit.
Right.
After his good friend Todd died.
Right.
But I bet you they talked about it. I bet you they embraced it in their own way, and it kind of gave me this thought of that I want to do the same. I want to do the same thing, whether it's people that we know or people that we don't, to talk about people going back out and what that's like, and the realness and toughness of relapse. That's one of the thoughts that it left me with. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because there is a part that, like you said, doesn't want to talk about it. And I think that's actually fairly common in recovery for people to not want to talk about their relapses and talk about their downs even. How many people do we know for sure are depressed in recovery because they said that they were depressed? Not many. But we know that it's true. We know that it's out there. We know that there are many people in recovery that are suffering from depression, but feel maybe they're worried that if they say that they'll be judged. Maybe their program's not good enough, or they don't want to be the bearer of bad news,
or they don't want to let their sponsor down, or they don't want to let their friends who got sober with them down. I mean, I know I relate to that.
Yeah,
I think it's weird, man. If I feel safe enough and I know the people that I could trust today and I bring it to the table and I know that I'm not, I guess being judged is one of the fears, which seems really fucking silly.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
It seems so silly for such a major disease that kills you without a fucking second thought. It seems so silly to feel bad about going to someone and say, I'm fucked up.
Right.
I'm fucked up. I'm depressed. I can't sleep. I'm anxious. I'm yada, yada, yada.
But I think it speaks to a point, like, what kind of environment have we created as a recovery community, like, that we, like, it's hard for people to even talk to other addicts about, hey man, I felt like using, or like, hey, I used the other day.
It's amazing.
You know?
It's amazing.
If we can't talk about it with each other, how hard is it going to be to talk about it with anyone else, you know?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I could only hope that, you know, listeners and you guys out there are like able to embrace that and able to sort of, and, you know, and part of it is on me too. Like, I need to start practicing talking about the not so great days that I have, or even how that podcast made me feel. Like, I remember immediately, I think I talked to you, Chris, and gave a shout out to Devin, who's not here, but gave him a call last night too as he was on the airport. And I talked to him a little bit about the podcast. It was just so mind blowing for me. We haven't even gotten to the part where we're really spoiling it for you either yet. But anyway, this is to say, like, they kept doing the podcast.
Yeah.
Right. Kept doing their thing. And anything happened before the bomb fell?
You know, I don't think it was that long between Todd passing away and the bombshell happening.
And the bombshell was basically Dave gets on the podcast and says the worst thing that could have ever happened to this podcast.
Oh no, wait, before that, they had one of their favorite Howard Stern guests on their actual podcast, Artie Lang.
Artie Lang came to their podcast. They were, I'm glad you stopped me. They were hitting like 6,000, right around Artie. They started hitting 6,000 downloads.
Okay,
which is huge.
Okay, $6,000 downloads per week or something.
Per episode. Huge for a podcast.
Yeah.
The two knuckleheads like us, you know, sort of. I'm sure they'll tell you they're knuckleheads too, but
they might have had more than that. But yeah, it was something. It was a great amount of.
It was a really good. Yeah, it was a great amount. It might have been. It might have been more than that. But that to me was like an unimaginable sort of like number for two guys, you know, recording this thing out of their kitchen or some shit.
Right.
You know.
And they have Artie Lang on.
Yeah.
And Artie Lang's basically drunk throughout the episode, which is probably sort of what they were expecting.
Dude, side note: have you looked at any Artie Lang pictures lately?
No.
Dude, if you were to go in and Google Artie Lang photos right now, you cannot believe what that dude looks like.
Really?
Oh my God. It'll leave you like speechless.
Why?
Artie, dude, I don't want to spoil that fucking thing. I mean, Artie Lang is a fucking drug user. I mean, this guy is like, I remember Artie Lang was one of those guys that did that on Stern, right? War stories.
Yeah.
Except in his case, he was making fun of people in recovery all the time. And he certainly wasn't sober like no. You know, Dave and Chris were.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, you got to check it out. Oh my gosh. I showed my wife some pictures of him last night. She thought they were photoshopped.
Really?
He's that bad. Yeah. Wow. He's one of those people that just is able to survive.
Like Keith Richards?
Like Keith Richards.
Yeah, that dude will never die. He's injecting gallons of fucking heroin liquid into his veins, but he's good to go.
Heroin mixed with like some gasoline and probably his dog's poop at this point.
Crocodile, yeah. He's just putting everything. But so they had Artie Lang on, and then they had a whole episode of recapping the Artie Lang episode because it was probably like a big deal for them. I'm sure it was a big deal for them. And then an episode after that, Chris was out of town, I think. But they were still going to record over Skype or over the phone or whatever. And Chris kept putting the recording session off. Like, was it a couple hours? Or?
It was like, it was. And then that's when I started feeling like, oh, dude, there's something wrong. Because he would be like, yeah, I'll call you in an hour, and he won't. And then it was a couple of hours. And then it was like one of those things. This guy, Chris, who had 2 more years than Dave, he just kept pushing it off and just didn't want to do it.
He had to do like laundry. He had to run these errands or something beforehand.
Total like just
putting
excuses, putting it off.
And then they finally do the episode like later at night, and Dave's like, "What's up, man? What's going on?" And
Dave started feeling like something was going on because his co-host Chris said his last name a couple times. They wanted to keep it anonymous, and he said not once but twice or 3 times. And then Dave goes, "Man, what's going on with you?" And what Dave was thinking was that Chris was uninterested in the show.
Right. That's right.
Right. He was like, he became uninterested. He wanted to maybe sabotage it in a way. He just wasn't down to do it anymore. And there goes my part into like, when do we talk to one another? When do we really fucking bring in the, whatever it is that's on our heart? So Dave didn't even tell him. I don't think Dave like asked him, hey man, are you done with the show? Like, I think Dave played it off as a man would for the most part, right? Like, get your shit together, man. What's wrong? All that.
No, I think he's either sent something to him. He basically said, if you're not interested in the show anymore,
he did
I
tell
understand.
Okay.
And Chris said, like, no, I'm totally still interested in the show.
Good on you, Dave. Yeah.
And
that's what Dave thought. I mean, when you're close to someone, you don't really start seeing maybe the signs, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah. We'll keep going, Chris.
Well, and then so Dave asked Chris, what, are you still interested in the show? And Chris says, absolutely. It's something that still keeps me going or something like that. And then the very next episode, as you said, Dave came on and says, the worst thing that could ever happen has happened, which is Chris has died.
OD'd and died.
Well, I don't think he said OD'd. I think he, did he say OD'd?
For one of them he did, maybe Todd, maybe his friend before that. Yeah.
I think I
maybe
remember him
died.
saying, we don't know what happened.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But like they had found.
You're right, he did say that, because I thought about a friend of ours that I was told the same thing about, that we don't know what happened to her, but yeah, she's gone. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think with him, they had found drugs.
Oh, dude, and that's another thing too. Like, it made me think how easy, because I thought it's been so long for me that I like tried to finagle or get something online from somewhere, and I've done that a bunch, as we all know.
Yeah.
Or as
well,
you know,
the listener doesn't know.
Did we not mention that whole story on the first episode? I guess not.
We had.
Oh, dude.
We got to get into that.
We got to get into that sometime.
Not right now, though. Yeah.
But basically, like, he's been ordering drugs online. They saw a box with methamphetamine, cocaine, Xanax bars, just fentanyl. That's what that's I think what his thing was.
Yeah.
They saw syringes all over the apartment. They suspect it was a couple of weeks. And then Dave does this thing where he calls Chris's girlfriend on the air and sort of says, hey, you're on the air. Do you want to discuss this? She's like, okay, And they started talking about it. And this to me, like at this point, I was didn't know whether to be in tears. I don't know why it was so fucking profound what went down. I think part of it for us, I think for me for sure, was that we are starting a podcast together. We're excited to bring you guys along. We just want to be, we want to make it in the right way. We just want to get our message across or whatever. And so I was able to relate to those guys. And all of a sudden to hear this guy, Dave, says, he didn't say it, but he basically is about to become a single host. If this keeps going, he lost his co-host. It was just so profound and so fucking oh my God, it was so powerful to me. It shook me up. And called Chris right away, and I was like, dude, hopefully we can start doing this thing like off the cuff, sort of current events thing, where we just bring you a bonus episode, which won't be long, but we just discuss a couple of things.
So what about it though? What about it shook you up? Like you said that because we're starting a podcast, it sort of hits close to home. But was it like a scared feeling, or like what was the thing that hit? Because you said something to me that I was like, what? Because I was like, damn, that is a strong reaction.
That was a very strong reaction. I mean, I felt like my gut sort of sank, and I was sitting in the chair that I'm sitting at now in front of my desk, and put my, like, I don't know, it just felt like after 20 something minutes of listening to those guys, it felt like I knew them. I certainly felt, I think, the strongest about Dave, finding out the way that he found out, and didn't have a chance to go to his buddy Chris and be like, dude, you said my last name twice, I know something's up. Or like, he for the rest of his life is always going to look back on what could I have done. And I think that was so profound, because as a listener, I'm not going to say like, as if I was listening to Dopey, I would have noticed something. Like, I'm not that intuitive, like But
maybe you would have, because that last episode that Chris is on, he certainly sounds like someone who has the opiate voice. You know the opiate voice?
I know the opiate voice.
Where like your voice is just like a little bit raspier, and like for some reason just like everything's just like you have to expend a little bit more energy in your voice, and he has that. And it also people who are tired have that, so it's sometimes hard to tell.
And I think that's something that opiate addicts go through a lot is like the I'm tired syndrome, the quote unquote I'm tired. Hey man, are you using? No, I'm just tired. I mean, God knows I've used it more than 250 trillion times, and I knew people weren't believing me either. I just still said it because in your mind as a fucking junkie, you're like, what else could I say?
Right.
That's going to come close to what they're going to be. It's like, you're using, man, I know it. You're right. Yeah. You're right. I'm using. No, I'm going to lie and say I'm tired, Was
that you with the spaghetti, or was that Adam?
Facing spaghetti?
Yeah, that was you. Okay.
That was me.
Yeah, because you said at one point you were having family dinner. Next thing you know, you're waking up with your face in the spaghetti.
My mom woke me up and she's like, son, wake up. Why was your face in spaghetti? And I'm like, it's not. And there's like tomato sauce and a noodle hanging out of my forehead. Like, really? Go fucking look at yourself in the mirror. It's just so ridiculous. And but I could hear it too. You're right, Chris. I could hear it in that podcast. And it was just like, I don't know, that very familiar feeling, I think, hit me. And then again, like, I think knowing that this guy, Dave, that was starting, tried to start something.
Yeah.
Has just lost probably his best friend. But what a fucking, like, man, such a big shout out to you, Dave. Maybe someday you'll hear us, but like, in my eyes, you just, a rock star for being able to process it on the air. I think I would have just, I don't know. Maybe at that point we got used to recording. We got used to people listening to us. You don't want to let them down. I think that's part of it. But
yeah, because it was like, I think 140 or so episodes to Dopey.
Yep, it was 140, 144, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it certainly made Chris and I want to record this and sort of process it. What did it leave you thinking? Like,
well, one of the things that really stuck with me was when Dana Chivvis is one of the producers on This American Life. She's the one that put the story together, and
she's great.
Yeah, oh my God, she's so good. She was also on Serial, but she connected this one episode. I guess they listened to a lot of the episodes of Dopey, and she connected before this happened with Chris, where Dave and Chris had a caller on. And the caller, or maybe not a caller, but an emailer, someone, a guest, sharing a funny story that had happened to them while they were using and drinking or whatever. And she had pointed out that the roles had sort of reversed. And that, in the very first episode, Dave said, if this show ever becomes about recovery, like, you're going to have to find someone else for the seat because recovery symbol, it's not funny, it's not fun, it's boring, it's whatever. But during this one episode where they had this guy share his story, Dave said something like, I'm sort of second guessing it. Basically, I'm summarizing here, but I'm second guessing this whole thing of, these guys that are just coming in and just calling or just letting us know this like fucked up story that happened to them or that they did, and like no sort of recovery being attached to it or something like that. And Chris was sort of took the other stance all of a sudden, was like, hey, it's funny, and Dave said, yeah, it's funny. Of course it's funny. That's what this whole show is sort of predicated on. But like, this guy can also fucking die.
Yeah, it became very real to him all of a sudden. Very true, yeah.
And I'm wondering, that probably happened after the Todd episode. I'm guessing the Todd thing probably
shook him up a little bit.
Yes.
For sure.
Because you're running along, you're having this podcast, it's fucking funny. Oh my God, like, listen to this shit I did. I went to jail, like, I shat myself. Oh, it's fucking funny. And we're going to have these guys and talk about their shit. And oh my God, you're so fucked up. And then all of a sudden, that guy is dead. Right.
What's so funny about that?
Exactly. Yeah. And so, like, and that's the finality of death. And, all of a sudden, like, it's not a joke anymore.
Yeah.
that was probably a big experience for Dave and probably started, I'm speaking for him here, but that's sort of what stuck with me is sort of like the role reversal that happened and why it happened to Chris. Why didn't he get that same reaction that Dave did when Todd died, where he said, you know what, this is serious. Like, I do need to make sure like I'm on my P's and Q's with my recovery and make sure that I don't go back out because I could die. It seemed like he didn't have that.
Right.
Whereas Dave did.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, oh my God, man, the whole thing and the way that they put together the story, very powerful. And, I almost wanted to, I don't know if I still would, I probably would. But I wanted to reach out to him, just let him know, like, this was amazing. And I was thinking, like, how many downloads do they have now? Right? Like, millions of people listen to This American Life.
Yeah. And just to wrap that part up with, I think now Dave does it for people who didn't listen to the episode, Dave still does Dopey by himself.
Yep.
But it's more so like guests. He has guests.
She said something so powerful too. She said, Dave still does it by himself, and it turned from a buddy comedy to a solo act interviewer. And he brought Mark Maron in. Right. He brought a couple of other people that had been kind of vocal about their recovery. And it just felt sad in a way. It just felt so different. And if that dude's recovery did not turn a 180, I don't know what would,
right.
But I'm really interested to hear it. I don't know if I can stomach listening to one of the hosts that shot up, OD'd, and died.
That's why I haven't gone back and listened to it.
Yeah, I wasn't in a hurry to do it.
Yeah.
I wanted to do it just to honor them before recording this, but I wanted this to be fresh on us because I had such a reaction to it and sort of left some stuff with Chris as well. And but yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a real trip, and you guys should check it out. You guys should check it out and support our brothers in arms, our soldiers.
Yeah.
And may Chris rest in peace. I didn't know him, but I know him.
Mm-hmm.
I really do know him.
That's what I was gonna say too. Is that Chris's death, it's unique in the sense that he had a recovery podcast.
Exactly.
But it's not unique in the sense that like this shit happens every fucking day. Like,
what are the ridiculous stats of people dying from an overdose? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like every time you take a breath or some fucking crazy stat like that.
Right.
Just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you're right. It got brought to the light because it's a story.
Yeah.
And it had a beginning, it had an end. And so do people out there. They're not on the air. They're not.
Right.
They didn't start a podcast like those guys did, or like we're doing. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know. As this podcast keeps going, we hopefully will try to shine a light on some of the things that we see, some of the things that we go through ourselves, and hope to get help from you guys as well. We certainly don't think we have any of the answers. We definitely want to discuss it with you guys and find out what you guys think.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely want your feedback on this.
Yeah, I want to hear what some of our listeners have to say about the Dopey episode on This American Life, or if they've heard Dopey in general, like what they think about all that stuff, what happened, and be able to process it with us.
My gosh, dude, can you imagine having been, like, I didn't even know it existed. Can you imagine having been a fan?
Oh, right.
And fucking tuning in one night and just, like, it's so surreal, man.
It is surreal because as This American Life episode went on and they played the part where Dave gets on air and says the worst thing that could ever, my heart was already, it had sunk so far down. Mm-hmm. And I had never heard this episode, or I'd never heard of this podcast 20 minutes prior to hearing that.
Exactly.
And my heart was already in my stomach.
Exactly.
Like,
you knew those guys. You know by then you would have gotten so close to them, and having been as vulnerable as they were and as crazy as they were, which we all were.
Right.
If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you're fucking nutcase too. At some point were, like...
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Let us know what you guys think. Any closing thoughts?
No, email us at thesoberpod@gmail.com.
Check us out on the socials. We're on the Sober Pod Facebook.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I mean, come on.
Come on.
Yeah, if you want to find us, you can find us.
Get with it. But what we will love the most, you know what? I've been hearing people on Reddit too. I was like, I gotta see what Chris thinks about Reddit. Apparently, Reddit is a good forum to have for your podcast if you just want a line or two. But what we would prefer from you guys is like an email, and we will read it. We promise we will. If we ever get backed up, we will let you know. But we definitely want to read your emails.
Yep.
Send us over. All right.
Sober Pod launching off.